right, let's see if we got, yep. Hey, thank you all for being interested in my trip to Turkey. This is one of probably about 12 trips, and I'm planning again to go this summer. And then I love going, not only because it's a beautiful country to visit, but also because it's so biblically significant. So thank you for being here this morning. I was glad to come. It's very helpful that it had to be time change weekend as well, so it just feels like this is normal time anyway. But so I put this together a couple years ago, kind of walking through some of the things in terms of showing the connections between biblical history and ancient Anatolian history. Anatolia was what we call Turkey today. Even there, they still call it Anatolia to refer to its ancient land. And so you can see kind of that pinkish area. That's the modern country of Turkey. And most of all of that land is biblically significant. The number of cities and places and locations that are there, you find mentioned not only in the New Testament, but also in the Old Testament, like the Hittites. The Hittite kingdom was spread all through that area. So let's just kind of keep working through some of these maps I have, just to kind of give you some geographic location of it. Let's go back one slide. So the areas, I've been actually all over except to the north, but Asia Minor is the region. It was a Roman province. Next slide. To kind of show you the way that it was broken down in Roman provinces. So the Roman Empire was massive, right? I mean, kind of really all the way from Israel, Egypt, all the way to Spain, and even England. And the way it was governed was through provinces. So I like to compare it to, well, we're in Louisiana. So a state is part of the larger United States, right? And even within a state, it's broken down into parishes, right? And each parish has its own, I mean, it's all still under one government. And so this shows you Asia Minor is that large southwestern part of what would be modern-day Turkey. And then next to it, you can see Galatia. So Paul wrote to the churches in Galatia. It's the province of Galatia. It wasn't a single church. It was a collection of churches in various cities. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. I have a lot I want to say, but just in terms of why it's important in terms of Western civilization and its ancient history, you have the Hittites, Troy. I didn't include the Troy pictures. They're there. I'm not going to show them because we didn't go to Troy on this last trip. But I've been to Troy several times, so if you've ever read Homer or the Iliad, or you're familiar with the story of Troy, it took place there in Turkey. Homer, the one who wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad, is from Smyrna, which is one of the cities of Revelation. A number of philosophers. King Midas was a Anatolian king. In fact, when we look at pictures of Sardis, according to legend, of course, you know the story of King Midas, right? He had that golden touch that was given to him. And at first it was great until he starts, he can't eat because everything he touches turns to gold. And then, he ends up, touching his wife and his little daughter, and they turn to gold. And he realizes that's kind of a curse. And in the legend, in the story, and he was actually a real king from that region. He didn't have a golden touch, but, myth develops around real people. He dipped his finger in the Pactolus River to get rid of the touch. And that Pactolus River flows through the city of Sardis, and it's still gold rich today. In fact, one of the things you can see when you're driving to one of the sites are ancient gold refineries that they've uncovered near the riverside. Number of other things. I'll skip through the history lesson because I got about 567 slides to get through. I have no idea how I'm going to do this. We're just, make it work. So these are pictures from the Istanbul Museum. And these are segments taken from the city of Babylon, so from the biblical period. Now, these are just hanging on the wall. They're beautiful, the colors, the vividness of them. You know, once again, when you look at things about the ancient world, you often see the weather-worn rocks and marble that's left over, but everything was very colorful. In fact, even the Roman statues and all the things you see would have been brightly colored. But overexposure to the elements, the color kind of begins to fade. So what happened is during the Renaissance, they were looking back to the ancient Greco-Roman art and seeing that as the standard, and so they started making all their statues in white marble. But the statues from the ancient world would have been very, very colorful. This is from Assyria. Once again, all of these things coalesce with biblical history. Let's just keep going. There's so much I want to talk about, but I'm not going to. Let's just keep going. Now, what's interesting about this, I will say this. These are ancient Hittite documents, clay tablets. They were written in what's called cuneiform. Basically, they were soft clay and then marked, and then they were hard fired. And look, this is really cool because that's like the envelope that letter would have been put in. Just fascinating, right? I would love to tell you what some of these say. I do have, they're really funny because some of them are like marriage contracts, some of them are even like divorce contracts, and some of the conditions are just, I find them humorous, but I have a weird sense of humor. Let's keep going. All right, so not only is it important for the biblical ancient times of the Hittites and Assyrians, but you also have the Greek period, also known as the Hellenistic period. And in the Hellenistic period, you had Alexander the Great, who fought back the Persians and took the Greek culture all the way as far to India. And so Hellenization is why the New Testament's written in Greek, because he brought Greek language and culture basically to the whole world that he conquered. And the Greeks felt like their culture was superior to everybody else, so you find that's where that mix of cultures comes in. Keep going. That's Alexander the Great. Now, this is not his sarcophagus. Sarcophagus is one of my favorite words. It comes from two Greek words, sark, which means flesh, and phagus, which means to eat. So a sarcophagus is literally a flesh-eating box. So when you put someone in a sarcophagus, it's basically a coffin, right? After a while, all the flesh is gone, you're left with bones. One of the kings of Sidon believed he was a descendant of Alexander the Great, so he made this sarcophagus for Alexander the Great. He's not buried there. But this shows you a little bit, not only of the detailed artistry, but you can see some of the remnants of the color on it. You see it? And so it just shows different battle scenes related to Alexander the Great. Now that guy, he's a Greek, and I just like the fact that like in the middle of the battle, he's like, I'm going to kill me a deer. Anyways, let's just keep going. You also have a lot of remnants from Jewish culture because during the Ottoman Empire, they controlled everywhere from Israel down to Egypt, so all the artifacts from those lands were ultimately controlled by the sultans, and they ended up in the Istanbul Museum. There's a couple that are pretty significant. This, which was most, you know, I just got to tell you, this is, Josephus writes about this. So in the Jerusalem temple, you have the court of the Gentiles, which is where non-Jews could go to the Temple Mount and mingle. But there was a doorway with a warning on it that no Gentile shall pass upon pain of death. Now, I've read about this for years as a Bible student, and then when I went there, I'm standing and looking, and the tour guide's talking, and I'm leaning up against this thing, and then she goes, oh, and that's the temple inscription, and I'm like, what? I was like sitting on it. The next year I went, it was raised and then cased in glass and everything. But that's a famous, I mean, that comes from the Jerusalem temple. Let's keep going. A couple other things. This is what's known as the Hezekiah inscription. If you've ever been to Israel, you can walk through Hezekiah's tunnel. King Hezekiah commissioned the building of a tunnel. Remember, Jerusalem's up on a mountain. The Pool of Siloam is their water source for the city. Well, when you attack a city, especially when it's covered, has walls protecting it, best thing to do is cut off supplies and water to the city, and they starve out. You read about that a lot in the Old Testament. So Hezekiah had a tunnel built down from within Jerusalem down to the water source, so they could never, they would always have water. And the way they did it, the engineers, they calculated one direction and the others coming in from another direction, and where they met, and it was perfect mathematic calculations. Where they met, they inscribed how they did it on a stone on the wall. I've walked through the Hezekiah tunnel. Where this is in Istanbul. Where this is in Jerusalem, there's just a plaque on the wall saying this is where it was found. But that's the inscription from the Hezekiah tunnel. Couple other things. Keep going. Lots of biblical stuff. Roman period. So you got to realize when you walk through the lands of Turkey, when you see something that's old, you got to really think, okay, how many thousands of years is this, And you think about America, New Orleans, where I live, is 300 years old as a city. That seems like an old city, especially for America. There, you go to places, and it can go back anywhere from 1,500 years to 3,000 years to 4,000 years. It really changes your perspective of just how many cultures and generations have lived in these places. So the Roman period is my specific area of interest. Let's just keep going. I'm just going to show you some statues. Normally I walk through all of this to kind of explain everything, but I'm not going to because I got 567 slides. But just noticing some of the artwork. That's actually Aphrodite. Keep going. Now that's from, you know what, I'm not going to talk about it because I'll just show the imagery. And once again, notice the beauty and the detail of the art. Let's just keep going, just kind of work through these. Once again, some of just the details. That's Apollo. Keep going. Apollo. Let me just talk about her. In fact, even when I was there, I pointed out to my group. Once again, you can see the paint on it, right? Like as I mentioned, it would have been much more vibrant back 2,000 years ago. This is a goddess that most people, I wasn't aware of. Her name is Tyche in Greek and Fortuna in Latin. It means luck or fortune. And most everything that you see in this area is dedicated to Agatha Tyche, good luck, right? Now, she was a goddess of blessing and abundance. And you can tell it's always her because there's a couple things, right? The cornucopia, right? The horn filled with all kinds of different fruits and produce, right? And then the baby, the child. Anytime you see a baby in statues and artwork like this, it represents fertility and abundance and prosperity. So in other words, the reason why she was so popular and the reason why so much is dedicated to her is because that's what people wanted, everything to flourish. They wanted things to go well. Now, part of the reason I tell you all this is because it helps you understand the context of early Christianity. You see, honoring the gods and the goddesses was part of what made the world run well. Everybody wants health. Everybody wants their crops to be abundant. Everybody wants things to go well. And if you upset the gods, famines and hardships and difficulties come along, right? So worshiping all these gods and goddesses was part of how they viewed life operating. Then you have a group of people who come along and say, no, we shouldn't worship any of them, just the one, Jesus. These are all false gods. Now, we agree with that, right? But the Christians were a vast minority compared to the rest of the culture. And so anytime they say, no, 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 we're not going to worship at those temples, we're only going to worship Jesus, that then calls them to be viewed with suspicion. And when bad things happen, it's their fault because they've upset the gods. Y'all follow me on this? Okay, let's keep going. Zeus. Okay, not only did you have the worship of the gods and goddesses, but the worship of the emperor was a huge component of this culture. And it wasn't just political, although it was political, right? If you don't honor the emperor, you're viewed once again as a political threat for revolt and rebellion. But also the Greco-Roman gods and goddesses were like, the emperors were viewed as those gods incarnate, right? So like the emperor was usually viewed as Zeus, and his family, different deity. And so people actually worshiped these human leaders. And once again, not participating in that caused you to be viewed with suspicion. I'm just showing you lots of imperial imagery. This one's interesting. This is Hadrian. This statue, when I'm standing at the base, my head comes to about the kneecap, to give you an idea of how large this is. Notice, no, go back. Notice that's a person they've subjugated. I call this Roman propaganda. Notice where his foot is. It's on the back of his neck. And this would have been something displayed prominently, and it's sending a message. It's not only showing the Emperor Hadrian in this instance as a mighty victor over anybody who opposes him, but it's also sending a message: don't mess with Rome. This is what we will do to you. We will put our foot on your neck. I'm also reminded of Psalm 2, where it's a messianic prophecy that says, sit here, speaking of the Messiah, until I make your enemies a footstool. So this is common kind of ancient imagery. Okay, let's keep moving because I want to show places. Lots of things I could, oh man, so much I could tell you. Okay, keep going. I left out a bunch of slides, believe it or not. Okay, keep going. There's so much I want to. Okay. No, keep going. Yeah. I was debating whether or not to include all this, but I will include some of it. Keep going. Because the imperial cult in particular is where I see the book of Revelation really coming into play. Because one of the things that we see in the book of Revelation is a beast, a ruler, who basically mandates everybody worship him, and if you don't worship him, you'll be killed. In John's day, the churches that he's writing, that's the reality of the believers. And the imperial cult, this is in Ephesus, this is the temple of Domitian. This is the reason why I believe John was in exile. Emperor Domitian built in 89 and 90, built a massive imperial cult temple in Ephesus. And I think John, the apostle, refused to worship there, and as a result was sent into exile. Now, that's just my own historical reconstruction there. That's what it would have looked like. Right now, what you were looking at, that hill, is just the foundation where it sat upon. That's the only thing that's been found in terms of statues that were there. That is either Domitian or Titus, his brother. Based on the remains, the head and the arm, this thing stood over 40 feet tall. Okay, that commanding sense of might. Yeah, let's just keep going. There's the altar from the temple. Let's just keep going. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Keep going. Okay. One of the reasons why I go and take people is because many Christians, especially in America, don't always realize, right? Because we think of the Holy Land, we think Israel. And Israel is the Holy Land, right? It's the land of the Bible. But people don't realize just how much of the New Testament takes place in this area. And so I like to take people, and they always come back and say something, wow, I had no idea this was here. Right? Sometimes when we read about these places and these things, we don't make the connections to actual real places where people lived. Pentecost mentions that there were Jews that day that became believers from Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, in Jerusalem, that became believers and then took the gospel back after they became believers from these regions. All these regions are in Turkey, all these cities. We also have an interesting, this is not in the New Testament, it's by Eusebius records this. There was a king of Edessa. Edessa's in Turkey, and he heard about Jesus and his miracles. And so he sent a letter asking Jesus to come and heal either him or somebody in his family. And Jesus sends a letter back and says, I'm busy working with here, but I'll send one of my apostles later to do the healing. And that letter, once again, there's nothing in the New Testament about it. I have it here. You can see an inscription of that letter from King Edessa to Jesus in Ephesus. And there's the translation of it, but we don't have to read all that right now. Let's keep going. Also, when you think of the apostles, you have Paul. Paul was from Tarsus. Tarsus is one of the cities we can go visit in Turkey. All his missionary journeys, Antioch, Galatia, Alexandria, Troas, Ephesus, several other cities, are all places where Paul did ministry and even wrote letters to or from those places. Peter leaves Jerusalem at some point, makes his way to Rome. He goes through Turkey to the north, and so he writes his letter to the believers in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. Philip, the apostle, was martyred in Hierapolis. And we'll look at his tomb here in a minute. And then, of course, John the apostle also lived in Ephesus and ministered. So the Gospel of John was most likely written from Ephesus, originally in Asia is where it would have circulated. Not just the Revelation, but also his 3 letters. So there's a lot there. Other places that are mentioned in the New Testament that you can find in Turkey, I'm not going to run through that list, but you can just see the massive abundance. Let's just keep going. All right, Paul spent 2 years in Ephesus. Let's look at Ephesus. Now, I'm going to just walk through and maybe highlight a few things in each of these pictures. Ephesus, let me just give you a little hint here. Ephesus was the 4th largest city in the Roman Empire. Rome was the most, with over 1 million people. Alexandria, North Africa, was the 2nd largest city. Antioch, where Paul was based with Barnabas and them, is the 3rd largest city. Ephesus was the 4th largest city. So in Paul's day, there would have been about 250,000 people living in this city. Just stop right there. Ephesus is the largest archaeological site in the world. You can go there, you can see it. You don't see anything like it anywhere else. Only 20% of it is excavated. 80% of the city still lies underground. I met an archaeologist there, and I asked him, I said, why is there so much? They said, well, we know where it is. You can actually see the boundaries of the city and know that it's there. He said, it's very easy. We dig, we find a rock. There, we know it's there. But once you find that rock, it's millions of dollars. And so he said, we're leaving that for the next generation, because the preservation and the restoration of it is so expensive. I just want to point this out. These are water pipes. You know, they had indoor plumbing back then. And all over there's water pipes you can see them in the ground. These are just some water pipes, but is there another slide of them, or is this it? Yeah. I don't know if you can tell it here, but they're all different sizes. Do you see that? Some are wide, some are narrow. Because they created water pressure. It wasn't just water dripping through there, it actually had pressure built up in it. And there you can see some remnants of it. Let's keep going. Domitian's Temple, I already pointed that out. Domitian's Temple. Oh, okay. Now this is a goddess. It doesn't, yeah. Anyone know her name? Well, I'm glad. What? It is Nike. Yeah. Now Nike is the Greek word for victory. Okay. So this is the goddess Nike. You know it's her. She is always winged. She's usually holding a golden crown of laurel leaf to place on the victor. And she often has palm fronds to symbolize victory. It's interesting because the Nike language is used in Revelation all the time. It's translated as overcomer, right? And the overcomers receive the crown of life. And I think it's a contrast. It's something that would have drawn from their daily life, but it's a contrast. Not the goddess, only in Christ do they overcome. But the company, no, go back. The company, accordingly, I mean, I don't know if this is actually true, but I think it is. The company Nike, right, got their logo from this image. Can anyone spot it? Yeah, underneath the arm in the pom pom. Her dress, where her leg is, where it's kind of folded over, makes that swoosh. Anyways, that's a fun thing to see. Let's keep going. So this is just, I'm just going to walk through some of these images. Just keep going. I like pictures. Okay, keep going. Lots of people played games on the streets. The marble. By the way, I just marvel at Roman engineering. These roads, when you ever hear the saying, like, all roads lead to Rome? Well, they all did. But they weren't just like dirt roads. They were like marble constructed roads that much of those segments still exist today. And I live in New Orleans that the roads are probably not even 100 years old, and they don't last a week. Just amazing. But they would carve in the marble. That's the stairway that goes up to nowhere, but there's more city. So you can see the green in the background. All that's more city that needs to be uncovered. There's the Celsus Library, probably the most famous image associated with Ephesus. This is the most popular tourist area. This would have been a latrine. Let's keep going. Now let me just say something, I know it's early on a Sunday morning. I've read a lot on how the ancients would use the restroom. Don't ask me why, I'm curious. When I see these things, I want to learn more about it. They would have sat this thigh to thigh. This was a men's only public latrine. They would have sat thigh to thigh. Often you made business deals, and it was a social event. In Pompeii, they found a little two-seater, kind of like in a cubby, and then scratched into the wall it says, so-and-so struck this deal on this day. Right? The urine would have been collected for I mentioned this the other day, right? The urine would have been collected for the launderers because they use the ammonia in that for cleaning clothes. And you see the water channel, there would have been water flowing throughout, and there was a stick with a sponge on it. But let's keep going. Just one common stick. One of the coolest things to see in Ephesus, this is on the side of the hill. These are called the terrace houses. They're beautiful, and it gives you kind of like the lifestyle of the rich and famous in Ephesus. So let's just kind of walk through this. You get to kind of see where people lived and how they lived. Once again, it just helps bring color and insight to the ancient world. This would have been a fountain. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, these are frescoes. So if you ever hear me talk about a fresco, it's a plaster with painting on top of it. So this would have been in someone's house, right? Beautiful. This is not the common folk. This is the wealthy from Ephesus. Let's keep going. Show you more of the images. High quality marble that would have been across all the walls. Let's just keep going. Now, one thing is cool is on this, somebody sketched in some graffiti of a gladiator match. So somebody watched a gladiator fight and thought, well, that's really cool, and they drew a picture of it on that wall there. You just see the remains of it. Mosaics that would have been on the floor. The artistry and the beauty of these is just unparalleled. Okay, that's likely a kitchen. You can see the water pipe in the corner. They think it's a kitchen because of the way it's set up, and there's animals like the fish and the bird painted on the wall, so they think that's probably where it was a kitchen. Later, that back area, that's not the kitchen part, that's a private latrine in somebody's house, bathroom. This is from an indoor bath, the mosaic. I like to joke, there's that mosaic on the top over there. We refer to it as the ancient Ephesus helicopter pad. Let's keep going. Okay, now, on our tours, we get, because the tour company I work with is very well connected, we get to do something special that most groups don't get to do. So coming out at the top, you're kind of on the side of the hill, one of the mountains in Ephesus, we got to go to a cave church. Cave Church of St. Paul is what it's called. They knew it was there 100 years ago, but under recent kind of work that was done, they uncovered a fresco of the Apostle Paul. It's the oldest image of Paul that we have to date. Still probably 2nd, 3rd, maybe 4th century, but it's somewhat of a treacherous walk along the side of the hill. Now, these are all pictures that I've taken over the years. You can see the outer wall. So everything from that wall, you see that wall halfway up that mountain? Everything below that wall is city that just hasn't been excavated yet. Let's just keep going. There's remains. You see that foundation? So we're looking at, I think that's not olives, that's probably some sort of fruit. This orchard here. So you saw the terrace houses we just saw pictures of? All of that would have been terrace houses. It just hasn't been uncovered yet. Let's just keep going. There's the theater, okay, just showing you orientation. So on the other side of that crane, somewhere up on halfway up that mountain is where we are. There's the cave church. There it is on the outside. You go in. It's not very big. But there is the oldest fresco of Paul. And it's Paul and Tekla, which is a later, like 2nd century document that talks about Tekla from Iconium, who became a female disciple like Paul was, like Timothy was, of Paul. And she became a Christian, and her mother, which is, you can't quite see her mother and her fiance tried to get Paul killed, tried to stop her from being a believer, and then she became kind of like an evangelist who went to other parts. Now, while the story itself is not part of the New Testament, this whole region is filled with images and allusions. There's even a city where she's buried that used to be a pilgrimage site. So I think she was a real person, but she's not, once again, not mentioned in the New Testament. Let's keep going. Just lots of images of the cave. In the back of the cave, there's either apostles or patriarchs. We're not sure. All right, let's just kind of keep getting through Ephesus. I still got a lot more to cover, and we got church in a little bit. It's hard not to talk about all of these things. Let's just keep going. Lots and lots of things to see in Ephesus. Okay, let's keep let's kind of cycle through these. Oh man, I have so much to tell you. Okay, keep going. There's Artemis from Ephesus. There was she was the patron deity. Okay. Outside of Ephesus, it's still part of Ephesus, where the temple of Artemis was, up on the hill. That's a statue of what the temple of Artemis would have looked like. It's no longer there, okay? It's been destroyed over the years, but its location, keep going. Location, you see that pillar out in that field? Is where the temple of Artemis was. On the hill behind it is the Basilica of St. John. Let's just keep going. That's what the Basilica of St. John would have looked like about 6th century A.D. It's where the tomb of John the Apostle is. He's not there. It's not because he's risen. Most likely when the Crusaders came through, they pillaged everything for relics, looking for holy, remains. By the way, this is the baptistry. I find this fascinating, right? It would have been immersion baptism. Let's just keep going. Okay, Laodicea and Hierapolis, two of my favorite sites. Let's keep going. This is Laodicea, one of the 7 churches of Revelation. Very wealthy city. You can see the remains. This is fascinating. About 15 years ago, this was a dirt field. So the excavation is going on at rapid pace. You see the mountains in the background. That's Temple A. They don't know what temple it was, but it's significant because they found some cool stuff under it. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Just different pictures. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. That's our group. Let's go back. That's our group. That's all of us that went on this recent trip. Okay, keep going. Keep going. Yeah. Okay. This was uncovered a few years ago. This is the remains of a 3rd century church. It had 2 doors. Okay, one door for non-baptized people and another door for baptized people. Fascinating. Let's keep going. This is one of their theaters. Okay, keep going. Big puzzle pieces to put all that together. Okay, keep going. I'll show you this is another theater. Now this was, when I first started going, this is what we went to. This is what we looked at. You can see all the seats kind of falling into the land and whatnot. Okay? All right? This was 2 years ago when I went back. Unbelievable. Let's go back. It could hold about 40,000 people. And they had 2 theaters. This was the small one. This is the larger one. They could hold 60,000 people, but it hasn't been excavated fully. Just different scenes. There's the church. They put a cover over it because of the mosaics. Let's keep going. That's the inside. Some beautiful, that's their baptistry. So you go in, you get baptized, then you could go into the church. Keep going. Keep going. This was interesting. We discovered, you see the 3 hearts? 3 hearts are coming from Deuteronomy 29:30. I will circumcise your heart, a reference to salvation and receiving the Holy Spirit. And there's 3 of them because of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Okay, now, this is my favorite part of Laodicea. This was just uncovered 2 years ago. This is a house church. So people met in homes, usually the homes of the wealthy people. And what I'm doing here is, this is the entrance into the home. This possibly, there's no evidence for it, but it is at least 2nd century, but this is the oldest house church that's ever been discovered. It's possible that even believers were gathered there, that the letter of Revelation that was sent to them would have been read there.
Is all this under dirt?
All of it was under dirt. Like seriously, I went back after COVID, that was there. I went just before COVID, it was just some rubble. You know, you could see the outline of structures, but it was all buried. But when Jesus said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock," He's not knocking on the person's heart. He's knocking on the door to the church where they would be gathered on the inside and he's on the outside. You see, they're having church without Jesus. Right? That's what he's asking. Can I come in? It's on the inside. Let's keep going. Oh, so much to see. Okay, let's kind of move through some of these rapidly. Well, not too rapidly. Oh, by the way, let me just show you this picture. You see all that green field in the road? All of that's Laodicea. It's just not excavated. But you can actually see in the ground, you can see where walls and building foundations are just underneath the surface there. Oh, let me tell you. He asked about the acoustics. So the first time I went to Ephesus, we were in the theater there. The friend I was with, he went down to the stage area. I went up to the very top just because I wanted the view. And I'm walking and I hear, Alan. And I look and I say, yeah? And he's way down there, a little tiny figure. He goes, you heard me? And he had just whispered my name. And I could hear him. Unbelievable acoustics. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. We got church in a few minutes. So much to see. By the way, the whole thing about Jesus saying, I wish you were hot or cold, but because you're lukewarm, I want to spit you out of my mouth. I don't know if you've read Revelation, right? Well, the whole idea that the people of Laodicea didn't have their own water source, so it had to be piped in, no evidence for that whatsoever. There is no water piping coming from Colossae or Hierapolis. They had their own water source. So it can't mean, right, that they didn't have hot or cold water. But let's just keep going. Just more of Laodicea. I love Laodicea. Okay, you see that white stuff in the background? That's Hierapolis. Those are travertines, calcium deposits. This whole region, this is the Lycus Valley, is volcanic. And these are from thermal underground hot springs that flow over the side of the hill, but because the minerals are heavier and the water evaporates, it forms these travertine formations. One of the most beautiful places you'll ever see. And this time, let's go through the necropolis pretty quickly. Oh, yeah. Oh, I want to say so much. Okay, travertines. Okay, keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, now on this trip, we took a hot air balloon over it. 900 meters up. I hate heights, but I enjoyed every single minute of that. So kind of just some new pictures I've added. You see the water underneath? Yeah, keep going. Isn't that beautiful? It was a place famous in the ancient world for its healing springs. It was a medical center. First time I was there and I was walking in the water, I saw this European traveler just scoop his hand up and drink some of it, and I'm like, yeah, why not? And then immediately I'm like, why did I do that? That was a really dumb idea. Nothing bad happened. But I did take an empty bottle of water and I filled some up. I'm like, I'm going to save some of this. The next evening, there was a layer of like white chalky stuff that I was like, that's going through my kidneys right now. But, so I've never drank it since then. Hierapolis is the place where Philip the apostle was martyred. And let's keep going. Keep going. They knew it was there. It was a pilgrimage site for early Christians. They would go there to pay tribute to Philip, who died because he preached the gospel there. That was the road that they would walk up. I've walked up the side of the mountain. It's torture. You actually can like just rent a little van that drives you up there now. But it's way up on the side of the mountain, likely where he was crucified. But in 2011, an Italian archaeologist found his tomb. So on this trip, we got to go to 2 tombs of 2 apostles, and that's Philip's tomb. He's not there either, but it's not because he rose from the dead. But there you see his tomb. Let's just keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay. 3 minutes or less. Let's keep going. You know what? Let's just go through Patmos quickly. I didn't go to Patmos on this trip. I went on another time. I really want to be exiled on Patmos. Seriously, it would not be torture. Beautiful. Yeah. Let's keep going. I need to have a part 2. Like, this is literally not even half my trip. That's Pergamum. Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah. We're gonna just have to wrap it up. I was gonna include Nicaea. I got like basically all the places that we've been, and then some. But let me just wrap this up, okay, with a cheap, shameless self-promotion. I plan to go back in 2024. Okay, I'd like to take a group, and I open up to whoever wants to go, whoever can go. This time we went to the 7 cities of Revelation. The next trip I'm planning, probably either spring or fall of 2024, I want to go do some of the journeys of Paul. So we would fly to Antioch, then we would go to Tarsus, up to Cappadocia, and then over to some of the cities of Galatia, and then down to the coast. It's absolutely gorgeous in that part of the country. And so if you're interested, let me know. I will keep you posted. But like I said, I'd love to take, my favorite thing about going now is watching other people fall in love with it. It really is astounding. People are like, well, Turkey, it's a Muslim country. It is, but it's moderately Muslim, very kind, very friendly, very hospitable people. You'll never feel in danger there. Just don't do anything stupid. But I mean, for the most part, it's a beautiful place. And every time I'm there, I can't help. I feel like I'm traveling back 2,000 years ago. And it just brings the Bible to life in a way like nothing else I've ever known. So thank you for listening to me Babylon for really short amount of time. That clock hasn't changed yet, so it looks like we're done with church for today. So thank you.
What's the cost?
The cost, I try to keep it down, but it's about $3,000. And that's everything. That's airfare, hotels, 2 meals a day. It's not food like lunch or tip and souvenir money, but it's a fairly reasonable cost for all that we get to do. It depends on what we try to do. If it's 14 days, it's actually probably going to be close